Good afternoon, Troy Hills Tigers. It's good to see you guys again. Well, a few days ago I read with the rats, and today I'm going to be reading with some of our cats. And I wanted to read something for the bigger kids. So one of the books I bought at our Troy Hills Book Fair recently, it's called Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. Weird title, so of course I had to read it. This is by Dusti Bowling. I'm going to read maybe a chapter or three and see if you like it. So here we go. Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. Really cool looking pages. Louie back there looks very excited about this, and this is Mr. Scrappy. For Bronte, you can do anything. When I was little, a kid pointed at me on the playground and shouted, "Her arms fell off!" and then ran away screaming in terror to his mom, who had to cuddle him on her lap and rub his head for like 10 minutes to get him to calm down. I think until then I hadn't thought about the idea that my arms must have actually fallen off at some point in my life. I had never really thought about not having arms at all. In case you didn't know, Avon has no arms in this story. My missing arms weren't an issue for me or my parents. I never once heard any of them say, "Oh no, Avon can't possibly do that because that's only for armed people." Or "Poor Avon is so helpless without arms." Or "Maybe Avon can do that one day, if she ever grows arms." They always said things like, "You have to do this differently from other people, but you can manage. And I know this is challenging. Keep trying. And you're capable of anything, Avon." I never realized just how different I was until the day that horrible kid shouted about my arms having fallen off. For the first time, I found myself aware of my total armlessness, and I guess I felt like I was sort of naked all of a sudden. So I, too, ran to my mother, and she scooped me up and carried me away from the park, allowing my tears and snot to soak up her shirt. As she drove us home that day, I sat whimpering in my car seat and asked her what had happened to my arms. Why had they fallen off? She told me they hadn't fallen off. I was just born like that. I asked her how I could get some new ones. She said I couldn't. I wailed in despair, and she told me to stop crying because having arms was totally overrated. I didn't know what overrated meant at that time because, like I said, I was really little, and so was my brain. I kind of figured it out over the last few days, though, because my parents were constantly saying things like, "Coloring this picture with my hands is okay, but if only I could color it with my feet like Avon, now that would be fantastic. And eating spaghetti with my arms is just so boring. I wish I could eat it with my feet. And the only person I know who can pick their nose with their toes is Avon. She sure is a special little girl." Dad even went so far as to ask Mom if there were any arm removal services in the area. Growing up, I could do almost everything everyone else with arms could do. Eating cereal, brushing my teeth and hair, getting dressed, and yes, even wiping my own bottom. I know you're instantly wondering how I do it, and maybe I'll tell you later. Maybe. Until then, you'll just have to live in suspense. Sure, these things take longer for me. Sometimes they take a lot longer. Sometimes I have to use a special tool like a hook or strap or something like that. And every now and then I want to scream in frustration and kick a pillow until the stuffing comes out because it's taken me 20 minutes to get my pants buttoned. But I can button my pants. I think I can do all these things because my parents have always encouraged me to figure out things on my own. Well, more like made me figure out on my own. I suppose if they'd always done everything for me, I would be helpless without them. But they didn't, and I'm not. And now, I'm 13 years old. I don't need much help with anything. True story. When I started kindergarten, the kids were a little weirded out about my lack of armage. I got asked about every day what happened to my arms, and well as a billion other silly questions like how do I make farting noises with my armpits when I don't have arms or hands, or pits, and how do I play dress up when I tried showing them and ended up with a poofy pink tutu thing stuck around my head for about 5 minutes before the teacher finally noticed and helped me pull it down around my waist. I got so tired of telling them the same boring story about being born without arms that I started making stuff up. It was stinking hilarious. I knew from the first moment I told a girl my arms had burned off in a fire, I found a great hobby, making up stories. I love, God bless you. I love the way her eyes grew wide with shock and the way her voice went all high-pitched with excitement as she asked me a bunch more questions about my charred arms. Her, "What kind of fire accident?" Me, "A wild forest fire burning out of control." Her, "Where?" Me, "In the mountains of Tanzania." I honestly didn't know where Tanzania was or if it had any mountains. I think I heard the name in an episode of Scooby-Doo or something. Her, "How old were you?" Me, "Just a helpless baby. My mom barely rescued me in time. She pulled me from my burning crib and raced out of our flaming village, leaving a trail of fire all the way down the mountain as my arms burned to a crisp. They looked like 2 pieces of bacon by the time we got to the village hospital. Another kid standing nearby, cooked or uncooked. So I kind of traumatized her, and I had to have a meeting with my parents and teacher later about my story. My parents squinted their eyes and pursed their lips and nodded their heads as the teacher told them. Even told another child that her arms burned off in a wildfire in the mountains of Tanzania. She peered at them over her glasses, frowning. She also mentioned something about bacon. I'd never seen such serious looks on my parents' faces before, like they were concentrating so hard on being serious that their heads might explode if they blinked. They said seriously they would talk to me about it and shook the teacher's hand seriously, hello, and gave me serious looks as we walked seriously out of school. But I could tell they weren't mad, because all the way home, one of them would softly snort and the other would giggle and the other would shake from laughing, but try not to laugh out loud, and on like that all the way home. I love that her parents think it's funny what she did instead of scolding her. I think their family has to be a little different because the circumstances are different. They later told me just to be truthful, so I didn't upset any other kids. And I did for a long time. But then one day in 5th grade, we had a new kid come to our school. And I'd gone to the same school since kindergarten, so all my friends knew I was just born with no arms. When I sat down at lunch with this kid, he said, "Whoa, what happened to your arms?" All my friends were looking at me, and what can I say? It exploded out of me like an overfilled water balloon. I told him this crazy story about how I'd rescued a puppy that had been tied to the train tracks just in time before a train nearly ran over it. Just in time for the puppy, but not for my poor flattened arms. You should have seen the look on this kid's face. Priceless. My best friend Emily burst out laughing, and my friend Kayla spit chocolate milk across the table. The new kid realized it was a joke and started laughing too. Pretty soon everyone was constantly asking me, "Hey Aiden, where'd your arms go?" And I would have a new story to tell. Over time my stories got more and more ridiculous. Alligator wrestling in the Everglades in Florida. Freak roller coaster accidents. Skydiving trips gone wrong. I made my stories as ridiculous as possible so people would always know I was joking. I grew up with those kids. I never felt out of place or anything like that. My armlessness wasn't strange or weird to them because, like I said, I'd always gone to the same school. I never imagined my parents would make me leave. I never thought they'd make me move all the way to Arizona and go to a new school right after starting 8th grade. Then again, I never imagined I would save the Old West, perform for an audience in the desert, and solve the mystery. You'd be surprised at all I'm capable of, though, even without arms. Chapter 2. The day Dad told me he wanted to apply for a job as a theme park manager in Arizona, excuse me, I thought it was quite possible. Aliens had taken over his brain, either aliens or the government. I knew from my great-grandma the government was capable of dreadful things. She was always saying stuff like, if the public only knew what the government was up to, there'd be a revolution, and pumping her spotted, wrinkled fist in the air. I wasn't completely sure why an 86-year-old woman who lived in a trailer in Kansas was the only person privy to this top-secret information, but she clearly was. Hey, Sage. New cat. New chapter. So I wouldn't put it past the government to insert some kind of mind-controlled chip into Dad's brain and force him to run a crumbling theme park in the desert. My parents discussed it with me one night over a dish of buttered noodles, my favorite meal. Oh man, I just realized they deliberately buttered me up with buttered noodles. Buttered me up meaning kind of made things nice so that I would go along with whatever they decided. So I got an email from a guy by the name of Joe Kavanaugh, Dad said over his noodles. He owns a place called Stagecoach Pass. What's that? I asked, slurping up a noodle. It's this Western-themed amusement park in Arizona. I guess he found my resume on one of the job sites where I posted it. Anyway, he invited me to apply for the position of general manager at the park. He must have been impressed with your resume, Mr. Big-Time Restaurant Manager, Mom said. Well, said Dad, I'm not really sure how managing a restaurant relates to managing an entire theme park, but I guess a huge part of their business is the steakhouse there, so that's probably why he contacted me. Are you going to apply, I asked. It does sound interesting, said Dad. I scowled. Arizona's really far away. Don't forget you were born there, Sheebs, Dad said. We spent a lot of time there during her adoption, and we really liked it. Ooh, her nickname is Sheebs, and she was adopted. We even thought it might be a great place to retire one day. The winters was so beautiful, warm and sunny. I'm sick of icy winters. What's the summer like, I asked. Mom grimaced. I've heard it's kind of like the surface of the sun. It could be an exciting adventure, Dad waggled his eyebrows at me, swimming and soccer all year long. I glared at my noodles. I don't think I want to play soccer on the surface of the sun. Come on, said Dad, you're such a pro, you could play soccer anywhere. So stop trying to entice me, I said. You haven't even applied yet. Well, if it's okay with you, I'd like to. On one hand, the thought of leaving Kansas and the only home I could ever remember sounded worse than anything. On the other, Dad lost his job nearly 6 months earlier when the restaurant he'd been managing went out of business. He really needed this. It's okay with me, I mumbled, feeling like I might cry. Dad applied, and then he and Mom were invited to go to Arizona for an interview and to check the place out. And then they were invited to stay and run the theme park together. Turns out it was more of a two-person job. And so we sold off a ton of our furniture and donated the junk we didn't need and packed the rest of our belongings into a giant pod that would magically disappear from Kansas and magically reappear in Arizona a week later. We drove our old car over 1,000 miles westward across the country, praying the entire time we wouldn't break down. We managed to make it in a single long day without stopping at a hotel until we got to Phoenix. By the time we arrived, Dad's eyes looked like atomic fireballs, really, really red, and Mom's hair looked like she'd taken a spin in a hairspray cyclone. Early the next morning, we drove by the giant covered wagon with Stagecoach Pass printed on it in large brown block letters, and I saw the park for the first time. Then I knew for sure the government and mind control chips were involved. Chapter 3. We parked in the large dirt parking lot and got out of the car. I squinted from the bright, hot sun. Had the sun been this bright in Kansas? I didn't think so. I looked around. I'd never seen so much brown before, not a patch of grass anywhere. Did grass even exist in Arizona? Again, I didn't think so. We walked over the compact dirt toward the entrance, which wasn't closed up, even though the park wasn't open yet. I guess they weren't too worried about people sneaking in. A lizard skittered across the dirt in front of me, and I jumped back. The dirt never ended. There were no sidewalks or grass or paved anything at Stagecoach Pass. Just dirt and old wooden buildings with old wooden steps and old wooden porches that looked like they might collapse at any time. Good morning! A cheerful gray-haired mustache man greeted us from one of these porches. He wore a cowboy hat and held a mug of something steamy. Coffee in this heat! Good morning, Mom and Dad said at the same time. Nice to see you again, Gary, said Mom. I looked at her. He's the one who interviewed us, she whispered to me. He's the accountant for the park. Gary walked down the steps, and this must be Avon. Our one and only, Dad said, squeezing his arm around me. I gave Gary a polite smile. He seemed nice enough, even though his gray mustache was awfully pointy. Well, Gary said, tossing his coffee on the dirt where it dried in about 2 seconds. I bet you're tired after your long trip. I'll take you up to the apartment. As we trudged toward our new living quarters, which were apparently located right over the steakhouse, Dad asked, so when do we get to meet Joe Kavanaugh? Oh, no one ever meets Joe, said Gary. Not around here much. That's strange, Mom said. A business owner who doesn't fit his own business? Gary smiled and tilted his hat at her. That's why Joe needs good managers, ma'am. Mom and Dad had described the apartment as a cozy but humble little place. They weren't kidding about the cozy, or the humble, or the little. Gary and a few men from around the park, all dressed like cowboys, carried our stuff up from the car. After Mom and I finished putting away the suitcases of bare necessities, she said to me, why don't you go out and explore, honey? What's there to explore? Tons of stuff, she said. There's a gold mine and a gift shop and a museum and a soda shop. You could get yourself an ice cream. She looked at her watch. It won't be open for half an hour, though. So I went out and explored for about 5 minutes. The heat got more and more intense with every second until I was forced into the air-conditioned museum. The museum was actually more like a room, just one room with picture-covered walls and a few artifacts in glass cases. These artifacts included a collection of stone arrowheads, some broken Navajo pottery pieces, a pistol from the 1800s, a pair of old spurs, and a genuine dead tarantula with information board that shared facts like tarantulas have no teeth, so they use their venom to liquefy their prey and suck up the liquid nastiness directly into their stomachs. How awesome is that? I scanned the framed photographs on the wall, the old wooden floorboards creaking under my feet. Most of the pictures were black and white, taken a long time ago when Stagecoach Pass first opened. It looked like it was quite the place back then. Crowds and rodeos and even parades on Main Street. Then I came to an empty space on the wall where it seemed a picture had been removed. The nameplate beneath the empty space had been left up and said, the Kavanaugh Stagecoach Pass, 2004. I looked around at the rest of the photographs, each of their nameplates, but I couldn't find any more of the Kavanaughs. I thought about what Gary had said, no one ever meets Joe, and I wondered why. There you are, Dad said from behind me. I've been looking for you. I turned around, just getting some cool air. Don't worry, Dad wiped the sweat from his forehead. It'll cool down soon. Guess what? What? The rodeo arena is all closed down, so I thought we could set up a soccer goal out there and practice. That sounds great. You want to go kick the ball around now? Isn't it too hot? Never. Plus, we can keep cool with ice cream. What if I get sunburn? They have sunblock in the gift shop. I smiled. You have an answer for everything, don't you? Dad put an arm around me and led me into the gift shop. Of course. Didn't you know that dads know everything? Dads know everything. I snorted as he picked out a small tube of sunblock from the rack. I'd like to be there when you tell Mom that. We're going to stop at page 16 in chapter 4. So far, I hope you're enjoying reading Insignificant Events in the Life of a Cactus. It's about Avon, who has no arms but has a really wild sense of humor. And I'll be bringing you to chapter 4 in maybe a day or two. Take care, everybody. I'll see you soon. Bye.